They laughed when she walked in, boots still stiff, uniform looking too new, posture quiet but controlled, and to the seasoned officers in the briefing room she was nothing more than a fresh cadet sent to observe, someone who didn't belong among combat-hardened veterans with medals on their chests and years carved into their faces, whispers spreading quickly as a few smirked openly, others barely hiding their amusement, assuming she'd be gone as quickly as she arrived, unaware that every step she took was measured, every breath disciplined, and every glance observant, because what they didn't know was that she had already survived things most of them had only read about in classified reports: urban extract ions under fire, night operations where silence meant survival, decisions made in seconds that saved entire units. And as the room buzzed with low laughter and careless jokes, the door behind her closed with a sharp click, the room settling just enough for her to stop, turn, and calmly remove the cadet insignia from her uniform, replacing it with the commanding officer's badge as her voice cut through the air with steady authority, introducing herself not as a trainee but as the newly assigned commanding officer sent to evaluate leadership, discipline, and readiness, the laughter dying instantly as faces drained of color, chairs scraping as men snapped to attention too late, realizing the test had already begun and most had failed before it even started, her gaze sweeping the room not with anger but with disappointment, explaining that respect is not earned by rank alone but by conduct, that underestimating anyone especially in uniform was a weakness no unit could afford, and as she laid out the mission ahead, her words carried the weight of experience, not ego, making it painfully clear that she wasn't there to prove herself but to ensure the unit was worthy of the responsibility they carried, leaving the room silent, humbled, and forever changed. Because in those few minutes they learned a lesson that would stay with them long after the briefing ended: never judge the quiet ones, never mock the unknown, and never forget that true authority doesn't announce itself, it arrives, observes, and commands. The room remained frozen long after she finished speaking, the weight of her words pressing harder than any shouted command, because she didn't need to raise her voice to assert control. Authority followed her naturally as she began outlining the first unannounced evaluation, a live readiness drill scheduled to begin immediately, catching everyone off guard as seasoned officers scrambled to regain composure, realizing too late that their casual disrespect had already been documented, their reactions carefully noted, and as alarms echoed through the base and teams rushed into formation, she moved among them with calm precision, correcting small mistakes, questioning assumptions, exposing cracks in leadership that had gone unnoticed for years, watching how orders were given, how pressure revealed character, how some officers barked commands without clarity while others hesitated, afraid to act without approval, and it became painfully obvious that experience alone did not equal competence, because while they had laughed at her moments ago, she now outperformed them effortlessly, anticipating logistical failures before they occurred, rerouting teams with tactical foresight, and making decisions that prevented simulated casualties, earning silent respect from the enlisted soldiers who recognized real leadership when they saw it. And by the end of the drill, when exhaustion set in and mistakes could no longer be hidden, she gathered the unit again, explaining that the purpose of the test was not humiliation but survival, that in real combat hesitation and arrogance kill faster than bullets, and that from this moment forward, excuses would no longer be tolerated, leaving them standing straighter, quieter, and far more attentive than before, because the laughter was gone now, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that they had underestimated the very person who might one day save their lives. By the following day, the atmosphere across the base had changed completely, conversations softer, movements sharper, eyes more alert, as word spread quickly about the fresh cadet who dismantled complacency in under an hour, and when she entered the command center again, no one laughed, no one whispered, because real respect had begun to take root, not because of her rank, but because of her consistency, her fairness, and her refusal to play favorites, holding everyone to the same unforgiving standard, including herself, often being the first awake and the last to leave, reviewing reports late into the night, mentoring younger soldiers quietly while confronting senior officers directly when standards slipped, and over time, even the most skeptical leaders began to change, realizing that her leadership wasn't about dominance but accountability, that she listened as much as she commanded, valued competence over ego, and demanded unity above all else. And when the unit eventually faced a real-world operation, one that required flawless coordination under extreme pressure, it was her preparation, discipline, and belief in the team that carried them through without loss, proving beyond doubt that the laughter from that first day was not just misplaced, but dangerous. And as the mission ended and the unit returned safely, standing in formation under the rising sun, they didn't see her as the cadet they once mocked, but as the commanding officer who reshaped them. Reminding everyone that leadership doesn't arrive loudly, it doesn't seek approval, and it never begs for respect, it earns it, step by step, until even the strongest voices fall silent and follow. The operation briefing began before dawn, the kind of mission that separates theory from reality, because this time it wasn't a drill and everyone in the room knew it, a high-risk extraction deep in hostile territory where one wrong decision could cost lives. And as satellite images lit the screen, she stood at the head of the table, calm and unshaken, walking the unit through every phase with precise clarity, assigning roles based not on rank but capability, a decision that surprised some senior officers yet earned immediate trust from the troops, because they could sense she understood the ground truth of combat, anticipating enemy movement patterns, weather shifts, and communication blackouts before they happened. And when the unit deployed under cover of darkness, moving through narrow corridors of ruined buildings and open terrain with no margin for error, her voice remained steady over comms, guiding teams through chaos, adjusting plans in real time as resistance intensified, choosing restraint where others might have chosen force, and decisiveness where hesitation would have meant disaster. And when an ambush unfolded exactly where older intelligence claimed safety, it was her foresight that prevented panic, rerouting squads, establishing overwatch, and extracting a wounded soldier under fire without a single additional casualty. And as the mission concluded with the target secured and the unit safely exfiltrated, the unspoken truth settled in this wasn't luck. This was leadership earned through discipline, experience, and the quiet refusal to underestimate danger. And when they returned to base exhausted and silent, every soldier knew they had crossed a line that night, from doubt into belief, from skepticism into loyalty, because she hadn't just led them through a mission, she had brought them all home. The success of the mission did not bring celebration, only a deeper tension, because victories in the field often expose fractures behind closed doors. And while the soldiers returned with renewed confidence in their commanding officer, not everyone welcomed the shift in power that her leadership represented, particularly those whose authority had once gone unquestioned. And as formal reports were submitted and commendations quietly recommended, resistance began to surface in subtle ways. Orders delayed, information filtered, decisions second-guessed under the guise of procedure, testing not just her command, but the loyalty of the unit itself. And rather than confront the dissent publicly, she allowed it to reveal itself, watching carefully who adapted and who clung to ego, understanding that true insubordination often hides behind politeness. And when a critical supply movement was nearly compromised due to miscommunication, she intervened personally, correcting the failure without blame, but making it unmistakably clear that accountability would no longer be optional, earning her the unwavering support of the enlisted ranks who recognized that she shielded them from politics while demanding excellence. And as pressure mounted from both internal rivals and external command questioning her unconventional decisions, she stood firm, presenting facts, outcomes, and lives saved instead of opinions. and in doing so forced a reckoning because leadership built on results cannot be easily challenged, and by the end of the week, when a senior officer openly tested her authority during a command briefing, it was the unit itself that responded first, standing in silent alignment behind her, proving that loyalty is not commanded by insignia, but forged through trust, and in that moment she realized something had shifted permanently, because the unit no longer followed her because they had to, they followed her because they chose to. The summons arrived without warning, a formal directive calling her to report to higher command immediately, and the tension was unmistakable because this was no routine review but a challenge disguised as protocol, driven by officers who believed her rise had disrupted an order they were comfortable controlling, and as she entered the command hall lined